There we go. Today we are talking about how to deal with writing with confidence, having confidence as an author, and wrestling with imposter syndrome, which is something every creative I've ever met wrestles with. Like, everybody struggles with imposter syndrome. It is honestly the worst. And those who don't struggle with imposter syndrome are usually unique people. Yeah, exactly, Nitin. How not to collapse under the pressure like a pudding. So, I'm assuming everybody here definitely has experience and knows what imposter syndrome is, but anybody who doesn't know what that is, imposter syndrome is so named because you feel as if you are an imposter no matter no matter how much time you spent doing a thing, no matter how good you are at it, you feel as if you're not actually that great, and everybody's going to find out that you aren't as great as you said you are, and is going to realize what a problem that is, and kick you out of whatever it is. So a lot of artists feel like they're going to discover that I don't know what the crap I'm doing. A lot of authors feel that way. A lot of creatives in general feel that way. Yep, it can definitely be all consuming and destructive to the morale. So that's what we're here to discuss today. And as somebody who consistently deals with imposter syndrome and always feels like they're going to find out that I really don't know anything one of these days and they're going to stop coming back. It's one of those things that definitely catches up to you. And I know, like, I've actually talked to some A-list authors who feel exactly the same way. So, at the very least, we can all rest assured that the fact that we feel this way does not inherently mean that it is true, nor does it necessarily mean that, we are imposters or that we're alone in this, because I don't know a single creative who doesn't experience shades of that. Like, all of the artists I know are like, this is awful. I don't know why anybody thinks this is good. Anybody who thinks this is good is lying to me. One of my best friends, Jen, she's a phenomenal artist, but I can't tell her how good an artist she is without her being like, no, everything is wrong. You're wrong and I suck. So it is a pervasive problem, particularly amongst creatives. Yes, it does. When you are successful, it doesn't mean that the imposter syndrome goes away. So I have been editing for almost 15 years professionally. I have been in the book publishing industry for the same length of time. I almost got my minor in creative writing in college. I have studied with a lot of people and I know a lot, but I constantly feel like I don't know anything and one of these days somebody's going to find out. I feel that all the time, but I've been doing it for 15 years. If I'd been doing something for 15 years and hadn't figured out how to do it by now, I really need a new hobby. So that is absolutely, that's sort of what it is. Like, I'm a violinist and I can listen to incredible musicians and critique myself out of existence, but if I play and listen to a recording of myself when I was first learning, I can obviously see the difference. So I keep some of like my early stuff around, including some of the really cringy high school poetry I wrote in order to remind myself how far I've come.
For a lot of people, being successful makes imposter syndrome even worse because the more eyes that are on you, the worse it gets.
Yeah, my husband, I don't know if you heard him, but in the background said that imposter syndrome can, in fact, feel worse when you are successful because the more people who notice you, the more you feel like there's more potential for them to realize you're a failure and a fraud. And I mean, like Kevin Smith, the movie maker, there are so many, like, high end creatives who feel this exact same thing. And it's unfortunate, but we aren't alone in the way we feel. And at the very least, it's not a matter of thank you, Ellie. I appreciate the sheer number of eyes
Just
you've
like what
sent
just
me.
happened with James Hetfield.
Yeah. So that is absolutely a thing. And that is an absolutely wonderful philosophy. Comparison is the thief of joy, right? Because if I'm comparing myself to somebody else, That's awful. Now, I do see some value in comparing myself to myself. If I'm comparing where I am now to where I started, obviously I have come a very long way, and being able to look back and see the growth over time can actually be really affirming. I've actually started keeping some of my firsts around. So I have the first piece of embroidery I ever did. I have the first yarn I ever spun. And when I'm feeling bad about myself, I can go back and look at those things and then look at what I'm doing now and say, well, I might not be where I want to be, or I might not be as far along in my career as I would like to be, but look how far I've come. And that starts getting us into the discussion of how to deal with imposter syndrome and what it actually is. Because imposter syndrome largely comes from struggling with comparison. A lot of times also the arts in culture around the world, the arts are not viewed as valuable in a lot of ways. And what we artists do, what we creative people do, is a little bit esoteric in a way. Because in some regards, we're kind of making magic. We are creating something out of nothing. When there is a blank canvas or a blank Word document in front of you, there's nothing. You only have the ideas in your head. And the only real validation we get of whether or not it's a good thing or whether or not it's quality is the response of people around us. So unlike, for example, I don't know, somebody who builds buildings for a living, well, the building is either empirically good or empirically bad based on the fact of whether or not it stays standing when you're finished with it, or if it collapses when you sneeze in its general direction. If the building leaks like crazy, it's obvious it wasn't very good. But it's a lot harder with the arts, because sometimes finding your audience and finding the people who are really interested in it is going to be its own challenge, because it doesn't matter how amazing a book is. If the person who reads it isn't into that genre, they aren't going to enjoy it. And that's really a challenging thing. Like, it doesn't matter how much I respect Stephen King and how well Stephen King writes. I'm not into what he writes. Like, horror doesn't do it for me. That doesn't take away from his quality, but if I'm trying to pitch my book to somebody who doesn't have any interest in urban fantasy and exclusively reads, I don't know, let's say, non-fiction biographies, it doesn't matter how good my book is, they're still not gonna like it. And since we don't have too many actual benchmarks about whether or not something we're making is good, we're going to internalize the opinions of the people who read it, and that can be really challenging when you haven't yet winnowed down and really found your target audience and found your fans. And that is a really important thing to note. Like, it doesn't matter how well you've written the book, if it's not going to appeal to the person you're trying to show it to, they aren't going to like it. Like, it doesn't matter how beautifully I make broccoli Alfredo. It doesn't matter how perfectly cooked the broccoli is. My husband doesn't like broccoli, so he's not going to enjoy eating broccoli Alfredo. Even if it is the best Alfredo I have ever made and would make Gordon Ramsay weep with the angels, my husband is still not going to enjoy it because he doesn't like broccoli. So that is one of the things that we ought to consider when we're looking at all of this kind of thing is don't internalize criticism particularly from people and sources who aren't your target market. That is going to be something that, like, take that into your soul. I have seen, like, I'm not going to rip on anybody, but I have seen some reviews of, let's even just say any product, it doesn't matter, on Amazon, from people who bought it and were angry because it wasn't what they wanted, and they bought the wrong thing. Like, people who get seriously mad about the fact that they themselves purchased the wrong thing, thinking it was something else entirely, and blame the manufacturer for their mistake. That is a really big thing. And yeah, Tanya, I really wish that people who admit that this book was not a genre I liked didn't leave bad reviews. Unfortunately, we can't stop them. But it's similar in the book review world in the sense of there is no way for me to really combat any bad reviews. And I can't not sell my book to people who won't like it because it's on Amazon. It's going to be purchased by people. And if somebody buys it, and I don't, extra credits? Yeah, it kind of. But if somebody buys a thing and gets really mad because it wasn't what they personally wanted, that's not a referendum on the quality of the thing. And it shouldn't be. And as creatives, we tend to internalize that. And I think all of us have had people who've read our work and said, wow, this is garbage. I hate it. And a lot of those people were never our target market, but we didn't know that at the time, maybe. Or they were just being mean without actual cause. And I'm sure all of us can think back at moments when somebody just said something mean and unhelpful about our art. I'm sure that all of us can look back at time and be like, wow, this person did not say something nice. I spent a lot of time working for somebody at one point, writing content for his website. A lot of time. It was a couple years, and I was working like 20, 30 hours a week unpaid on his website, producing content for him. And it was never good enough. This was while I was working for a publisher who didn't tell me what the style guide he wanted me to use was, but continually harangued me about the fact that I was not formatting the books and editing well, in his opinion. But he never actually told me what the style guide he wanted was. And things like that are really common in creative circles. And I will even say they are extremely common for women in general. It absolutely happens to men. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't, but women do tend to take a lot of that and carry a lot of that criticism from external sources who are being critical without giving useful feedback. And it happens to me a lot. And so it really destroyed my confidence in myself, and my confidence in my ability as an editor, and my confidence in my ability as a writer. And it took me a really long time to even start thinking, I actually do know what I'm doing, and I can write a good book. In a lot of ways, the experience of building a platform and having people become fans, like, it's weird to say, it's really weird to say, but I legit have fans. And having those fans, because I've spent a lot of time building my marketing platform, if you don't have fans yet, that doesn't necessarily mean your book isn't good, that just means you haven't found your people yet. But when you do, you will start to feel maybe a little differently, like, oh, okay, well, even if I'm just continuing my writing for this one person who's really excited about it, who isn't my mom, it feels really good. And you can think, well, maybe I don't suck. The thing about imposter syndrome is, I feel you, lead, but part of that is we have to get you out there. And that is definitely part of it. Like, none of us really feel, most writers I know are introverts, and they don't really feel comfortable showing their stuff in public, particularly not talking about themselves in public, or like really being like, hey, look at this excellent thing I made. Most of us are like, please don't look at me, please don't talk to me, please just leave me alone in a hole with my computer to write things, and I'd rather not engage with anybody if you don't mind. And putting yourself out there is absolutely terrifying because we have that feedback and that experience of whether it's our writing or something else in our lives of somebody saying, this thing you made is awful and I don't like it. Like, I think it's a universal human experience, but with things like writing, we don't have that empirical ability to just shut it off. Like, you know, if somebody walks up to a house and says, well, this is awful, I don't like it, but it hasn't fallen over and is made solidly, like, it doesn't matter if they like it or not, it's still a good quality building, theoretically. I mean, we're not going to talk about those weird architecture choices like toilets up on daises and pedestals, all right? Those are design fails. That's a completely separate thing. I'm talking about the framework of the building. But that is kind of what I'm getting at, though. The art is subjective. That's a thing. Like, creative writing is an art, and art is subjective, and people are going to like it or not, or connect with it or not, and there's nothing you can do about that. And while there are things you can look at and be like, yes, empirically, this sentence is of quality in so much as it is grammatically correct. It doesn't use like really bad syntax. It's correct. This character is made in a way that is classically proven to be quality. You can do stuff like that and look at your writing and be like, okay, I can analyze. Wow, that's the word my brain made today. Analyze. You can analyze. Words are hard. You can analyze your work and look at it from an empirical perspective to some extent. But in the end, it's art. And art is a lot more wibbledy. And thank you, I appreciate the support. I've been awake too long today, and I did not sleep last night or the night before, so today my brain is an interesting place to live in. So these feelings, one of the things that I learned in business school, and you will have heard this a billion times in your life, I'm sure, is the phrase fake it till you make it. I am certain all of you have heard that phrase in the sphere of confidence boosting or in the sphere of business. And weirdly, it actually works. Like, so a lot of the time when I'm talking to somebody, like when I'm talking on camera here, I seem, for the most part, be generous, please. I usually seem like I know what I'm talking about. I'm usually confident in what I'm saying. I appear to be knowledgeable on the subject, and people tell me I'm engaging and fun to talk to and fun to listen to, which makes me happy because as a teacher, those are all things that I should be. I should be able to communicate ideas in an understandable way. And that's something I really work on. What I'm projecting here is almost a persona, and that's going to be one of the things I'm going to talk to you about that is going to help you a little bit with the imposter syndrome and having confidence is creating a persona. But I'm projecting a persona. Behind this version of me who seems very adroit, put together, and focused, and with everything, is like three goblins in a trench coat who just want to eat potato chips, growl at the world, wrap themselves in blankets, and read something. Or watch Netflix. And that's how I feel. I don't feel as confident as I've come across on Contact because a lot of the time, these lectures, except for the ones where I have PowerPoints, and even then sometimes, they're kind of off the cuff. I think about it. And I have actually studied human psychology. I've studied the things that would lead me to be able to put these ideas together and make a cohesive conversation. But it looks like I'm a whole lot more prepared than I am most of the time. Like, it looks like it. Like, bless you. I have more than once had to extemporaneously do something, and I have the ability to make it seem like I planned it all along, and a lot of that has to do with body language, and a lot of it has to do with that persona I mentioned. So, getting back into the idea of introverts not really wanting to interact with the world. Now, let me start by saying I'm autistic, and this is a thing that autistic people like to do, but creating a persona for myself. It's like creating a character for my books. Like, I have author Ellis, and I have personal Ellis, and I have a couple different versions of me that appear in different places. But the professional, polished, public-facing, extrovert version of myself is straight up a character I'm playing to some extent. Because I don't like eye contact. I don't really like social situations, but I can fake it real good. And faking it inspires people to be confident in me, and their confidence in me helps assuage some of that inner nasty voice that likes to say mean things to me, and it creates a positive feedback loop, which is what I'm going after here. When I was a performing musician in public, I was usually absolutely terrified before I started a gig. Like, it was scary to play music in front of people. I mean, I don't really have stage fright per se, but it's still scary to play music out in public and be judged at a bar full of people. And at the same time, I wouldn't project that fear. I would just pretend like the mistakes I made were this is a jazz version or whatever have you, or I would make jokes, laugh it off. And when you project those things, when you laugh off mistakes, when you project and act like you're calm and confident, act like you want to be there, smile, make people feel as if you're connecting with them personally, all of this other stuff, things that this book specifically teaches. Ooh, it's backwards. Hold on, let me see if I can fix that on my end. Um, hold, please. Is this gonna work? Yeah, there we go. So, this book is one of my go-tos. This is the reason I can communicate with people and get what is it backwards? It's frontwards on my screen, it's backwards on your screen, everything is weird. Cats and dogs living together, it's chaos. I'll flip it back. That's really confusing. Anyway, the book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I picked it up when I was in business school as part of a business management class. And the thing is, it talks about basically projecting an air of confidence while not feeling it. Like, how you feel and how you present yourself might be very different creatures. And looking at it as I'm creating this character, excuse me, I'm creating this character who is me, but a version of me who is confident. I'm pretending to be this version of me who does have their crap together, who does know what they're doing, who is comfortable in public. I'm this version of me, and as you pretend to be this person who is all of those things you want to be, it becomes easier because initially you're like, hey, nobody will know. I am pretending, mustache twirl, nobody will ever find out that I actually don't know what I'm talking about. And you can convince yourself that you're just tricking the world, and the fact that you can pull one over on them is kind of empowering. If it makes you feel better to think of yourself as the big grift is that I know what I'm doing, go for it. Yes, exactly. You can turn it into a whatever helps your head feel better. But for me, pretending to be this version of myself that is composed, put together, polished, capable, skilled, knowledgeable, and all these other things. Okay, maybe it is sus, but pretending to be this person helps other people believe that of me, and in turn helps quiet the imposter syndrome, because it creates that, like I said, that positive feedback loop where other people's response to me, more often than not, is the response that I was looking for and hoping to inspire in those people, which feels affirming in the sense that, okay, they think I know what I'm doing, or they've enjoyed my book, they're enjoying my book, they like talking to me, and the things like what I have to say matter. And now I'm not actually lying to anybody about these things, like, other than my feelings, because the reality is, I do know what I'm doing. I've been studying publishing and writing and all of that other stuff for a really long time now. Like almost half my life at this point, if we look at the number of years. That fact alone shows I know what I'm doing. Like, if we were to look at empirical data, mastery and number of hours spent and the amount of time studied, yeah, I know what I'm doing. But this is more about feelings than it is about empirically. Now, I'm not in any way suggesting that you go out and pretend to be something or somebody you're not and lie about your credentials. Like, it might feel like a lie, but don't actually be dishonest. Like, don't say, I'm a multi-award winning author when you aren't. So don't say anything that's like categorically untrue in your quest to, create a platform for yourself. And I have been, one of the platforms I spend the most time on recently is TikTok. Angel knows I tag her in things regularly. I spend a lot of time on TikTok. I have a channel that is growing relatively successfully. I have currently like 1,300, almost 1,400 people following me. People engage with my content. They like what I have to say. I've had newsletter signups. I've got clients who found me on TikTok, things like that. And the thing about TikTok is it's very, very good for being honest on. If you're a hot mess, great. You're going to find other people who are hot messes and enjoy each other's company. And TikTok's big thing, at least in Book Talk, I can't speak for certain other segments of TikTok because every click has its own thing. But in Book Talk, authenticity seems to really connect with people. And while I do, in some ways, project myself as being funnier, more confident, and more knowledgeable than I feel, the data I'm giving is all sound. And it's setting me up for a positive feedback loop. And the number of times I have been told that what I have to say helped somebody or made a difference for someone, the number of times that has happened has really helped boost my confidence. Now, I know this is a lot of me talking about me, but you can use the same sort of techniques. Find a space where you are comfortable and subjects you are comfortable sharing your knowledge about. And like TikTok, you don't need to show your face to be able to do this. Like, I know a number of you are really like, oh, nobody needs to see this. Please, please do not show my face. There are a lot of very successful TikTokers who don't show their faces. In fact, there's an author I follow and love, and she does all of her videos in like full, like the black pajamas, the quote unquote ninja outfit that isn't actually a ninja outfit, but we're going to overlook that. It's a kabuki thing. But anyway, she does all of her videos in like head to toe. You can see nothing except like her eyes and her nose because she doesn't really want to show her face, but she does absolutely wonderful and hilarious. She does some really wonderful and hilarious videos, but she's not showing her face and really revealing her identity. And maybe, Tanya, like your audience may or may not be on TikTok. Like you can, the thing about social media is you have to find the social media, the one that really is the one that you want to focus on. I'm focusing on TikTok. You could focus on Twitter, whatever one makes sense for you. But building your community and connecting with people. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to get into the whole target market thing too deep, but your audience, your target market looking exactly like you isn't bad because there are other people who are into the same things you're into and would connect with the same things you like and can empathize and be part of the experience that you have had. Like there are other people who've been through hell. There are other people who are extremely, who enjoy Supernatural and Critical Role. Like, there are other people who enjoy those things. So connecting with people who enjoy those things is finding your target audience. Like, those are the people who are going to buy your books because they like a lot of the same things and a lot of the same tropes and such that you use in your books. So, I mean, this isn't a lecture on identifying your target market, but confidence is, in my experience, mostly me pretending I feel confident, absent a few very specific times. Yeah, well, that's okay. Like, my target audience has more money than I do. I'm broke. But things like, there are times when I'm absolutely 100% confident in what I'm doing and have no questions. Like in an emergency, I react very quickly, very effectively to whatever it is and handle the situation pretty effectively, like particular kinds of emergencies, like car accidents, medical emergencies. Um, I could probably handle a fire if I had to, like, because I have the ability to just zero out and stay calm during that. Like, afterwards, I'll be a complete disaster, but in the moment. But those are times I'm actually confident. Or I become suspiciously confident whenever somebody tries to challenge me on something I know is absolutely correct. Like, if somebody tried to challenge me on, I don't know, the whole, like, turmeric being the wonder drug thing, and people who try to argue that with me, I become very confident very quick when I tell them, no, that's not actually the case. Stuff like that. The Oxford comma, yes. I mean, I'm very confident that those who do not use the Oxford comma have problems. Right, so you're going to... So when you are looking for your confidence, like, lean into the things you know. So, while I don't necessarily feel like I'm the most amazing author ever, I do know that I have researched and studied the craft of writing for a very long time, and if somebody were to try and tell me that using ly adverbs 6 times every sentence in the entire book is a good thing, I would feel very confident and clear-headed about saying, you might want to reconsider that because you're wrong and you should feel bad. I probably wouldn't phrase it that way, but you get my point. Yeah, exactly. Like, there's that moment, like, where, okay, so if a person challenged me on this thing that I am not always so confident about, and said, no, you're wrong about this and you don't know anything, I'd be more likely to get my dander up and be like, excuse you, I think not. And get very testy about it. I'm not saying you should get into arguments with people who disagree with you in order to boost your confidence that you're right, because that's not the best decision, but I can tell you I'm very confident when that happens. But that does kind of, in some ways, go to show when it is things I actually know, like, if like the Oxford comma. Like, I have a very strong opinion about the Oxford comma. I'm aware that it's an opinion and there are other schools of thought, but those other schools of thought are wrong. um, or you can have an argument about whether or not a taco is a sandwich and be very confident in your decision. I personally ascribe to the cube theory of food, which which angers everybody and entertains me. Yes, tea is soup. I'm on board with this. Like, if it angers people and confuses them in the realm of whether or not a taco is a sandwich or whether or not a hot dog is a taco, I will take the side that angers people. Humans are fish. All right. So these are the kind of things that, like, technically, yeah. But can an infusion be a soup or a tea? And I mean, tortilla is valid as bread because it is flour. Now, it's unleavened, but it definitely does meet the qualifications of bread, because not all bread has rising agents in it. Does a straw have 2 holes or one? I guess it depends from the perspective of which you are looking at it. So these are the kinds of things, like, if you want to boost your confidence, one thing, like, all joking aside, though, um, that is a... When you're looking at ways to boost your confidence and ways to feel certain of yourself, go look for things that are utterly and completely wrong, and you can start seeing, like, I feel pretty confident that I know this thing. Or you can go back and look at if you're not sure that your writing has progressed any, go back and look at something you wrote as long ago as you have access to. Like, I have stuff somewhere that I wrote in high school that is absolute cringe. It is horrible. It is bad. It is dumb. And a lot of this stuff that is in it is in it. I was a kid. So I can look at that and I can look at what I write now and be like, wow, I've come a really long way and I can feel good about that progress because that's measurable. And the only person I'm comparing myself to in this circumstance is myself. So in those circumstances, when you're and that is the only healthy comparison is comparing yourself to yourself. If I'm comparing progress, right, Rurik, I think most of us do. Like, I think most writers have a period of really cringe writing when they were young. And that is, I mean, all of us do it. All of us have it. I have some really cringy poetry I wrote when I was in high school. Like, really cringy. And it is stuff that I really don't want the rest of the world to see and would be very happy if nobody knew existed and it stays in a drawer. But if I'm ever feeling like, wow, I suck at writing and I've not made any progress and I'm awful at this, I can pull that out and be like, oh no, never mind. I can also look at some of the things that I did in college and wrote in college and look at how I wrote back then and compare it to how I write now and be like, okay, I can see where I have gotten better. Well, it might be cringe just to yourself because you're like, oh no. Um, like, I wrote some really emo poetry in high school. Well, Tanya, in this case, if you've deleted or burned everything that's cringe, you can even take a look at something you wrote a year ago, 2 years ago, or the oldest thing that you have access to easily, and compare it to where you are now, and take a look at the differences. If you have been actively trying to work on improving a thing, even if you don't have way back in the mists of time stuff, which is fair and valid, not everybody does. Well, you can be proud of the fact that you wrote it and proud of, my high school me wrote a novel and that's amazing. But if you're looking for measure of progress to see whether or not you should have confidence in yourself and whether or not you should have confidence in your writing, look for progress and change. And that's the kind of stuff that you really want to look at. Like, compare yourself to yourself. If I recorded myself learning violin at age 6, trying to figure out how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, to the kind of stuff that I was doing when I was at my peak before my shoulder was messed up 5 years ago, if I got those two recordings and played them together back to back, it's night and day. Things like that. That's why like I said, I have this collection of things that are my firsts, like the first yarn I spun, the first embroidery I did. I keep some of that stuff explicitly for the purpose of seeing where I go from there and seeing how I develop. So if you have them, pick up something that is as far away from where you are now as possible. Like, whether the last thing that you have is a year ago, whether it's 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it is, look at something you wrote before, look at something you wrote now, and see the differences and see the growth. Now, confidence, it can be a challenging thing when you have no audience yet, you haven't published a book, nobody's actually seen your work. It can be really challenging and scary to feel like you should have confidence in yourself. The confidence in yourself is not going to be a mistaken belief that you are perfect, your writing is superior, and that you have earned the right to something as far as publication goes, because the people who come in and send query letters and are like, I'm deigning to send you my query letter, you should feel lucky, those go in the bin immediately. It's more the ability to look at your writing and think, I have created something that is worth having and worth creating. I cannot read Turkish. So that is the key here. Like, you don't necessarily want to assume that confidence is oftentimes defined by a lot of people. It doesn't mean that you should believe that you are freaking perfect. It doesn't necessarily mean you should believe that you have no growth left to do. It shouldn't equal the philosophy that you can just... Anybody who criticizes you is wrong. Because I can take criticism but still believe that I am not a garbage writer. Most of the time. So that's kind of the thing, is you also... And part of the reason I have this group is we are here to, in some ways, hype each other up, right? Well, we are here to critique things when requested. Excuse me. We are also here to encourage each other. Right, some people cannot critique well. Some people will either say, I liked the whole thing, everything was perfect, I wouldn't do anything better, which isn't useful, or they will say, it's garbage, I hated it, everything's wrong, and not give you anything useful. Some people are not good at critique. And yes, Ellie, that is entirely correct. You have the right to express yourself artistically, enjoy the process, and practice to improve. The confidence piece, and the thing is with imposter syndrome with writers, if somebody believes you are a good writer, it's because they read something you wrote and enjoyed it. And our entire job, for the most part, is to provide people with something they can enjoy. Doesn't need to be more complicated than that. Have something enjoyable that we've created that somebody else has read, and just be like, yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed spending time doing that. That's all you need. That's the only requirement, is for whoever is your target market, specifically whoever your target audience is, somebody from that saying, I enjoyed spending my time doing that. That's complete success. So you can have confidence in the fact that, well, if somebody who is in my target market, if somebody who enjoys the things I enjoy reads this, I can be pretty sure they're going to like it because I enjoy all these things and I liked it, and that's enough. That's difficult, Rurik. That is really difficult. Unfortunately, we are going to face people like that in our lives. We're going to face the people who leave 1-star reviews because they were an English teacher in the 70s and think that you can't start a sentence with an and or a preposition, and will be like, the grammar was atrocious and I refuse to read this drivel, it is trash. You're going to encounter people like that, but those people, there's no pleasing them, so, you know, do we really care what their opinions are? Like, their opinion isn't valuable or useful or helpful in any way. So you can dismiss those. Like, that is another thing for the imposter syndrome. When, not if, but when somebody says something disparaging, start off with, do they know what they're talking about? Like, is it something that do they have a point? Or is it just, I'm angry because I bought a nail file and it didn't put on nail polish for me, and I thought it would put on nail polish for me, and I ended up with a nail file, despite the listing on Amazon saying it was a nail file. I mean, those people, you can't please them. So don't try. And critique from people who are worth taking critique from is generally kind. And if it's not kind, you don't need to hold on to it. It's not worth keeping. You know, if so say I have an abusive ex and he gave me a teddy bear that wasn't even a teddy bear that I liked. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't cute. It was horrible. It was scratchy, and it was something that was just awful. Why would I keep that teddy bear? I mean, I wouldn't. I wouldn't keep that teddy bear. It just reminds me of somebody who hurt me, and it isn't even something I like to begin with. Treat people who approach your work with unfounded and unkind criticism in the same way. Their opinions are that teddy bear. It's somebody out there who's just being a jerk, not acting in good faith, giving you something you maybe didn't request, and if you did request it, it certainly wasn't that. And they're giving you this thing that is pretty awful, and you didn't want in the first place. So are you going to give it room on your shelf and hold on to it? No, of course you're not. All of these things, and I know I'm kind of wandering around in the weeds some, but all of these things are part of imposter syndrome, and part of why our confidence as creatives gets eroded, because some of the issue, honestly, is the internet. Because if we put our babies, our work of any kind, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's writing, whatever it is, out in public for people to see, there are going to be people who are going to be jerks about it. Period. And the internet tends to breed people behaving badly because they think they can get away with it and don't view another individual online as an actual human being, and will make horrendous comments about somebody's art because they feel anonymous, and they don't really see how the other person takes those things. Like, it's a proven psychological phenomenon. Like, the internet is great. I love the internet. Obviously, we're using it right now, but the anonymous factor, it's a very Ring of Gyges kind of situation. And if you don't know what the Ring of Gyges is, it's an ancient Greek myth that essentially, if you know the story in Lord of the Rings of Smeagol, finding the ring, turning invisible, hearing bad things said about him, and like becoming a horrible monster as a result, and killing people and stuff. That's this. Tolkien must have read the Ring of Gyges, because it's almost a one-for-one of that story. So the internet is in some ways the Ring of Gyges. It is the anonymous ability to hear what other people are saying about you without their knowledge, and it's just going to hurt you. So that's one of the reasons, honestly, why I don't really look at my book reviews. I don't really read them. Because, like, if I need a boost, I'll take a look at, like, 5-star reviews. If somebody, if I need a boost, I'll go and look at, like, the high reviews. But I mean, yes, but I don't really consider myself superior to anybody, so I don't have the ability to be like, well, I'm better than you, so your opinion doesn't count. That isn't how my brain works. I can't feel that way. But I can say that if somebody leaves me a review, it'll boost the algorithm, so it doesn't matter if they liked my book or not. It's irrelevant. I know that Jace Carter here uses some bad reviews as marketing material, which is hilarious, because there were people who got really mad that her books were very spicy, and they were like, this is inappropriate for a Christian family kind of commentary, and it's like, did you read what you were getting? And she's used it as marketing material because her target audience is like, ooh, yes. Right. I mean, and that's a good thing, Tanya. Like, if you have a friend who vets them and sends you good reviews, that's great. Like, if you can form a relationship with somebody who does that for you, awesome. But reading reviews is not really worth doing, because regardless of whether they review your book well or badly, not the quality of the review, but if they give you a good review or a bad review, it doesn't matter. The algorithm still sees activity and boosts your book anyway, so ultimately, it doesn't matter that much. And having a few not good reviews on your book is actually good for the algorithm, and people tend to take it as being more serious than if you have nothing but 5-star reviews across the board from everybody. Because people tend to be like, that's suspiciously good. So even bad reviews actually do serve a purpose in your author career, so don't take them personally. And I mean, there are, like, for all you know, that person's having a bad day and just wanted to lash out at somebody, and your book happened to be the thing they were reading. They're like, well, I hate it, and I hate everything about it, and I hate you. And it has nothing to do with you. Maybe they're just irascible that day because they woke up and stepped on a Lego that morning. And that kind of thing, like, don't internalize. The thing that I say a lot, that I don't remember where I got it from, but don't take criticism from people you wouldn't go to for advice. Don't internalize mean things from people you wouldn't go to ask their opinion. Like, if I'm walking down the street and somebody insults my fashion sense, I don't really care what they think. I wouldn't ask their opinion. I don't know who they are, but I ask my husband what he thinks of the outfit I chose because he has a much better fashion sense than me and usually is the one who dresses me because I am awful at it. And if he says, yeah, you look good, I'd go to him for my opinion. But if he says, maybe don't put that shirt with those shoes, I'm going to take his critique because I go to him for advice and know he knows what he's talking about, so his critique is valid and also comes from a place of construction. You know, maybe he wouldn't wear that shirt with those shoes because they clash horribly and I am just awful at fashion. Which is why I'm grateful he dresses me. But at the end, imposter syndrome ultimately comes down to us projecting our anxieties and low self-esteem into other things. A lot of creatives struggle with self-esteem, feelings of whether or not we have value, feelings of whether or not what we're doing has value, because society likes to say art isn't a valid career and you're wasting your time, which is nonsense because the minute people aren't working, they consume art. It's like all they do. It's when people are not engaged in work, they're usually consuming some form of art. So that's a reality, but we're constantly getting told that what we do isn't good enough, that it's not, commercially viable, all this other stuff. And absolutely, Lead, you're entirely correct, because furries make money hand over fist with art, and all the time. And but there are other like TV shows. The people who write episodes of TV shows, they make money. And people constantly watch TV. Like, it's art. So we have this feeling, a lot of us internalize that art isn't valid, and had people say that our art in particular isn't any good when they weren't our target audience. And all of these things lead up to this feeling that I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to be good enough, and I'm worthless. That isn't true, like on an empirical level. Period. It's not true. You are not worthless. Art is not worthless. Even bad art isn't worthless. I mean, I've had people... I had a friend who was learning to crochet make me the most awful scarf I have ever seen. It was just atrocious. But she made it with love, and she was really proud of her having made something. And I love that scarf. I wore it until it came apart. And I had to take the yarn and turn it into another scarf myself because I didn't want to let go of it. The scarf itself, it was atrocious. But it had value. Good isn't just about whether or not something is perfect, because art can't be perfect. There's no... or rather, art isn't about perfect or not. Art is about making somebody feel something or respond to something. Perfect is a lie. It's not like in carpentry, you don't have a level and you can't be like, yes, this is plumb and exactly what it needs to be. And there's art is personal, and it's about making people feel things, think things, connect with things, and experience things. So hating on yourself for not being perfect is unproductive. Because you will never be perfect. You will never be imperfect. Art is beyond the concept of perfect and imperfect. Well, elements of it might be perfect or imperfect, like grammar and punctuation. Even those things, grammar and punctuation, have multiple different style guides. So even then, whatever you do is going to be imperfect by somebody's standards. So the confidence can come from the fact that you don't need to be perfect to be darn good. Perfect is the enemy of good. And you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to sell 1 million books before you're valid. Again, that's the thing that a lot of artists get, subjected to. Well, if you're a writer, how many books have you sold? Doesn't matter. You're still an author. You're still valid. You're still good. All of these things like to undermine our confidence, and all of these things lead to imposter syndrome, like straight there, like on a railroad into imposter syndrome. Not good enough. All of this other stuff. It's awful. And, right, so Aquamarine, you being good enough? I mean, what's good enough? Good enough to who? The people who would enjoy the type of writing you do? Or good enough to please people who would never enjoy that type of writing to begin with anyway? Like, I don't enjoy Stephen King's books. I will never enjoy Stephen King's books. That doesn't make them not good. But if he's writing to please me, he's never going to, because he can't. I don't like that. It's not my thing. It doesn't matter how good quality it is. It doesn't matter how good the broccoli Alfredo is. My husband is never going to enjoy it because he doesn't like broccoli Alfredo. So don't bother trying to please the people who aren't your target market. I'm not going to bother making my husband broccoli Alfredo. Well, my cat's grumpy. I'm not going to bother making my husband broccoli Alfredo. I'm just not, because he won't enjoy it, so I'm not going to try and give him my broccoli Alfredo. Why are you attacking things on my desk? I'm sorry, I'm being grumped at. Look. Hey, don't attack me. This is my desk. Go on, chew. Goodness. Sorry about that. No, that was Monster. That was Monster. She's the spicy one. And Tanya, that's okay. You can always work on something else until you are that level of writer. I have a book series that I would love to get out into the world that I've been working on and off for a very long time, but I haven't quite been where I need to be in order to get that series out. I'm not quite there at this point. So I'm going to work on something else until I'm ready to do that one. That is actually a thing. I saw a blog post from, I forget who, a really big-time writer talking about how he couldn't get a book in a series to come out the way he wanted to. There was nothing he could do about it, and he was really upset about it, and it wasn't coming out the way he wanted, and nothing he was doing was happening. It wasn't going to happen for him, so he had to do something else for a little while. And that's okay. And you do something else until you're ready to do the thing that has been stressing you out. Right, so it's okay to work on something that isn't your magnum opus for a while in order to start establishing your presence as an author, because also, the reality is, unless you are extremely lucky, and it is just extremely lucky, your first book is not going to be the one that makes you famous. That's just reality, period. Your first book, heck, your first series, might not be the thing that'll make you famous. Your first book will not get you there unless you are really lucky. And your first book might be the entryway into the series that eventually makes you famous. But the vast majority of authors, did you know, like The Hobbit, all of the Tolkien's books, The Hobbit was not the first book Tolkien wrote and tried to sell? It wasn't. So all of these, but it's the first book we know about him writing. And like To Kill a Mockingbird was not her first book, but it's the first book that she sold and the first book that went big. Your first doesn't need to be a rest. So let me just throw that out there right now. If you are waiting on perfection to start trying to publish, and you think that I'm not a good enough writer to write my magnum opus, so I should wait until then, you're just going to be stuck in a waiting. You'll be in a loop forever. I mean, just write some garbage and publish it if it makes you happy. So work on, if you don't feel like you can do the series that you're really excited about justice, write something else for a little bit. It doesn't matter if it's like the magnum opus, because your first book, your first series. Okay, so I'm a big Jim Butcher fan. I like Harry Dresden. The first book in the Dresden Files series is not very good. Like, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading it, but it's not very good. Like, that's just a reality. It's not extremely well written. It's not like knock your socks off amazing. It is not a particularly noteworthy novel. The rest of the series is excellent. Again, if there are people for whom Harry Dresden does nothing, but there are other book series where the first book, but it gets way better after that. It's okay if your first book is not the best book you've ever written, because your first book is not going to be the thing that makes you famous. Right, Ellie, if the best book in the series is the first one, something's gone wrong because there's nowhere else to go from there. Because usually if the first book is the best one, that means the rest of them are not as good and don't live up to the hype, which sucks. Right, exactly, Tanya. Like, the first book is not... The first book is not the best book in the series. It isn't. It certainly... I enjoyed it enough to keep reading the series, but it didn't, like, knock my socks off. It wasn't until book 3, where I met Michael, that I was like, alright, this is really excellent. And Rurik, yeah, I mean, there is no... I don't know that there's nowhere else to go but up, because I've seen people start bad and then start digging. And, like, they just... It's like, I didn't think that you could be worse than you were, but yet here we are. So I wouldn't say there's nowhere to go but up, but all of these things, like, you don't need to be perfect. Your books don't need to be perfect. You just, if anybody enjoys them, you've done your job. Well, it's tough from a business perspective to deal with sales and marketing and all of that. That's not what this talk is about. Sales and marketing are a completely separate beast, and getting your book in front of the eyes of people who will enjoy it is an entirely different discussion. But if even one person feels that the time they spent reading what you wrote was pleasurable, congratulations. You did your job. That's all you need to do. And the imposter syndrome telling you you're not good enough, that you suck, and all this other stuff, those are other people's voices in your head, and you don't need to keep them. So confidence is going to be learning to ignore those voices and be like, well, just because reviewer Karen McDonald is mad that there's a comma out of place on page 32 and thinks the book should be burned, I don't know how much that matters to me, because Bob Cheeseburger over here said the book changed his entire life, and he connected with the characters in a way he hasn't connected with another human being since the Stone Age. Bob Cheeseburger, shut up. You know, perfect is the enemy of good, and that was a perfectly good name, so shut up. It was an excellent name.
Names are not your forte.
Look, man, a salad's a soup. I'm gonna start pulling out the cube rule. No.
You should be.
Yeah. Well, you're exactly, Ellie. See, they appreciate it. You don't have to. See, my target audience is these people, not my husband who's being critical over in the corner. But that's what. But if even one person enjoys what you wrote, that's enough.
Surrounding yourself with yes men won't help you grow.
Yes, they will. Bob Cheeseburger thinks so. Right, Bob Cheeseburger's my cheerleader. He's my boy.
It's because you wrote him that way.
That's enough.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not talking about like the quality of cheeseburgers as a food. I'm just saying Bob is an excellent man. All right, Bob Cheerburger. Yes, I need to make him a meme of our group. I'm gonna need to.
Mascot.
Yeah, he's gonna be our mascot as Bob Cheeseburger. I now have regrets for coming up with this entire idea. Because I know I'm gonna spend too much time trying to draw him. So, does anybody have, like, I'm over time, I know I am. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they would like me to address regarding imposter syndrome? Because I know that this kind of wandered around a lot, because I'm very tired today, but does anybody feel that either A, I made any sense, because if I made sense to you, please tell me, and B, if you have any questions before we go anywhere. Have a good night, Lead. Aw, I'm glad I was able to help, Tanya. Yeah, it's perfectly good to have role models who are super famous. Like, there's nothing wrong with being like, wow, I'd like to be like that person. That's super cool. But that's not comparing. That's giving yourself a goal. Or giving yourself something to emulate and model yourself after. I'm not sitting down and being because I would love to be as successful as Jim Butcher, and I'm in the same genre, so he's a great role model for that, but I don't need to look at my writing and look at Jim's and be like, how do I make my writing more like Jim's, and Jim is better than me, and oh god, I suck. But saying, Jim does a lot of stuff right, I really like how he does this, I'm going to learn from that, and use it in my own career to become what I'm going for. You know, I have bits of my writing that are very reminiscent of Neil Gaiman, Jim Butcher, Anne McCaffrey, all the writers that I really look up to and spend a lot of time reading. I have elements of their writing that is now mine. I am nothing if not a collection of other people's ideas. So that is completely healthy. Just don't compare it in the sense that, wow, he's so much better than me, I suck, because that's not productive or helpful. Yeah, give yourself an imaginary writer family. Yeah, that's perfect. Like, if that's what you want to do, if you want to not be forgotten, the question is not forgotten by the world or not forgotten as an author, because that's going to be tough. The idea of, not because I don't believe in you, but because trying to make yourself such an impact on the world that you are never forgotten is really difficult. Like, there are millions of very, very talented people the world has largely forgotten over time. But what I can say is it's a very real thing that your writing might impact somebody in such a way that they carry that impact with them for the rest of their life. Like, even if the world forgets Anne McCaffrey, not that I think they will, but even if the world forgets who Anne McCaffrey is, I will never forget the feeling of reading her books and listening to the book on tape. Yes, this is before audiobooks. The book on tape version of Dragon Song, and the way that Master Harper Robinson in that series impacted me and made me feel like I wanted him to be my dad. And the way he comforted me, and the way that all of those stories kept me company and gave me a world that I could explore when mine was falling apart. And in some ways, that's less about Anne McCaffrey herself and more about where I was and the fact that those were the books I had. But someone out there is going to feel that way about your book if you publish it and publicize it and get people to see it and buy it. Someone out there will feel that kind of feeling about your writing someday. That's a very reasonable goal. But the tools to get there is going to be marketing, promotion, getting your book out there, all of that stuff. But that's a real thing. The world might forget you, but the people who are impacted by your story will not. Rurik, I have deep concerns, and Aquamarine, yeah, like, right, like, I mean, honestly, like, this whole workshop is a weird collective writing family. We're all, like, each other's weird cousins. So, there's that. For better or for worse. Alright, it is almost 15 minutes after. I'm gonna wrap this up, because this was really long. Remember, do not take criticism from people you would not go to for advice. And perfect is the enemy of good. Your job is not to be perfect. Your job is to entertain somebody. And if you have entertained anybody at all, ever, congratulations, you're a success.
Yay, I'm successful.
Exactly. That's all you need. Alright, do your job, Tanya. Looking forward to it. Yes, be the writer Bob Cheeseburger knows you can be. Bob Cheerburger, sorry. Be the writer Bob knows you can be. Have a good evening, everybody. I hope that... as a side note, I will not be here next week. I am traveling next week. I'm going on writing retreat to hopefully finish up the book I'm working on and a short story that I am going to be doing for a collection I'm in. But the week after, I will be back. And Rurik, that's it. Congratulations, you're a success. You entertained hundreds of people with your fanfiction. That's success. Congratulations, you're successful. As a writer. Now, being successful in the business of publishing is separate, but you're successful as a writer. Congratulations.